The Philadelphia Eagles are Super Bowl champions. Eagles fans everywhere, this is for you. Let the celebration begin.
Rue, I'm going to try to make it through this podcast without sneezing, but my allergies are going pretty wild today.
Really? It's that first couple weeks of spring, man. It's bad for allergies.
It's brutal. And it's like, I love being outside so much, but I can't do it too much. I was outside on Saturday for most of the day, and Sunday I woke up, my head was just like that old commercial where the balloon floats. It's like the guy's head. That's what I felt like.
What was that a commercial for?
Like a allergy medicine or like Sudafed or something.
It's funny how like all the best commercials, like nobody knows what they're for.
Yeah, so my mom always says like she thinks that's the sign of a bad commercial, but I think it's the sign of I think it's like buried deep in your brain. Like, you know, if you're looking at two products and you won't even remember it, but like you're like, oh, I know that product from that commercial, but you won't think of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know. I will have to do a study. Like there's so many great car insurance commercials out now, but I don't know which one is Geico, which one is State Farm, which one is, you know, whatever.
I think they're playing you at a subconscious level.
Could be.
That's my theory. This is the Eagle Eye Podcast with Reuben Frank. I'm Dave Zangaro. We have Andrew Krammer from the Star Tribune in Minneapolis joining us in just a little bit to talk about Anthony Harris. We'll get into DeSean Jackson finding his new home, DeVonta Smith at the Pro Day in Alabama, and we'll get into my Eagles-only mock draft, which people actually liked. It's rare for people to enjoy my mock drafts, but this one went over well. But today we'll start with Joe Flacco. As we're recording this on Tuesday morning, he's not an Eagle. That could change. So we'll just kind of talk about it from the idea standpoint. Joe Flacco as the backup, Rube. What do you think? Does it make sense?
I think it does. I think makes a lot of sense. I think it's a good fit in a lot of ways. You know, he's not a guy that's going to threaten Jalen Hurts or you know, whoever. I don't think they're going to draft a quarterback at 6, but if they did and Flacco was 3, he's not going to threaten him. Or if he was 2 and Jalen Hurts was 3, I guess anything's possible. He's not going to threaten anybody. I think he's 36 now. He knows his days as a full-time starter are behind him. Had some great years or some very good years in Baltimore, some great postseasons, and he's won 11 playoff games. It's like the 11th most in history. So he's you know he's got great experience. He can win you a game. He didn't play bad for the Jets last year. He was 0-4. Darnold got hurt. He started 4 games, but he played okay. He played fine, which is all you want from that backup. Just a guy who can get you through a game, get you through a few games if he has to, and Flacco can do it. And I think and people are like complaining that he's not the kind of, you know, stylistically he's so different from Jalen Hurts, which obviously he couldn't be more different. But where are you going to find a guy, you know, who wants to be a backup, who's okay with the role, who has Jalen Hurts' skill set? You're not going to do that unless you want to bring Michael Vick out of retirement. So I think, you know, you get a guy, Joe Flacco can play in any offense. He's a really smart guy, local guy from South Jersey. His brother was a state champion at javelin, and Audubon High School, the Green Wave Colonial Conference, right, Dave? And, you know, so I think it's a good fit in a lot of ways. And I think the biggest way is a smart guy who can get you through a game, but isn't going to come in and create any trouble, be a problem. He'll be content being the backup, understand his role, mentor Jalen Hurts or any other young quarterback, and come in and not be a threat to that guy.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we obviously knew the Eagles were going to have to sign a quarterback at some point because they only have one on the roster right now with the Carson trade, and Nate Sudfeld's a free agent. So we knew they'd have to sign somebody. And I was curious to see like what level they were going to go after because they let that first wave go. And in that first wave is where they could have found someone with a more comparable skill set. If we're talking about Tyrod Taylor or even Jacoby Brissett, who isn't as mobile as Hurts, but he can move a little bit more than Joe Flacco. But they let those guys go. And to me, that kind of signals that they didn't really want a competition because I think, look, if you sign Tyrod Taylor, you kind of have to have a competition because he's like that fringe. Even Brissett is like the kind of fringe starter level player. Fitzpatrick would have been that. So I think you would have had a competition there. And hey, Fitzpatrick can move too. But with Flacco, you're right. I mean, as long as he understands, and I think he does at this point, that he's a backup. He's 36. He's not as good as he once was, and I think he knows that. And that neck injury, that was a big concern this time last year, but he played last year, so I don't think it's a huge deal. And it's interesting because he went to the Jets last year, obviously, where Joe Douglas is. Joe Douglas has the history in Baltimore when he was there when they drafted Joe Flacco. And so is Andy Weidel, who is the top personnel guy with the Eagles right now. So, and a lot of the scouts and a lot of that scouting department. So there's a familiarity there that seems to check out based on going to the Jets last year.
Yeah, and I think all those things are important. And he 6 touchdowns, 3 interceptions in 4 starts. Not world-beating numbers, but all you want from your backup is a guy who can get you through the games without, throwing 3 interceptions, without embarrassing himself, without embarrassing the team. Just give the team a chance to win a game 20-17, and I think he does that. And really, I think out of all the guys that are available right now, I think he makes the most sense. I thought Brissett made a lot of sense. I really like Tyrod Taylor. I think his game, but I think guys who are in that 28 to 30 range, it's going to be hard for them to come in and say, yeah, I don't want to be the starter. Maybe they could say it, but it's not true. And even a guy like Fitz has played at such a high level that I think he would have trouble coming in and saying, I don't want to compete. I don't want to, because if Fitzpatrick comes in training camp, he's going to be incredible. I mean, that's who he is. He's just a really talented guy who, in that setting, in a training camp setting, is going to be lights out. But I think Flacco, you cover yourself. He's good enough to win some games, but he's also not going to be a problem, not going to be a threat. And there is some familiarity, like you said, with him. I think it's a perfect match, and he's not going to cost you a ton.
Yeah, but it's funny because I didn't know what they were going to go after in that veteran. I thought there was a chance they'd want one of those fringe guys to really push the young quarterback. But it seems like if you sign Joe Flacco, you're signaling that you don't want a competition, that you just want a backup. And I don't think that's necessarily the wrong move. I just wasn't exactly sure which tack they were going to take. Yeah, I think Flacco will be fine. The price has to be right. You can't pay a lot of money for Joe Flacco. Those other guys are more expensive. I mean, they got big deals, so that's a factor too. You're still up against it from a cap perspective. And the thing with Flacco is it's probably going to be a 1-year deal. You can get creative with it, but it's harder to fit 1-year deals with the salary cap because you can't spread it out. Now you can do the dummy year thing, which the Eagles are probably doing with Anthony Harris, but it makes it a little tougher to fit them in.
Yeah. I'm not sure what kind of number he's looking for. The only other team that I know he's visited, I believe, is the 49ers. I'm thinking, so there's not a huge, 10 teams clamoring for him. So, we'll see what his price is, but I think he'll be affordable. I don't think that's going to be an issue. I mean, backup quarterbacks make a lot of money. And just as a rule, they make considerable amounts. So it's not going to be, $2 million, but it, should be a manageable number.
Yeah, you're probably right. What wouldn't have been manageable was 3 years, $39 million for Adoree Jackson.
Wow.
A big deal for him joining the Giants. He was scheduled for a visit with the Eagles on Monday night, never made it. He ends up signing with New York. What was your reaction to that? Because it seemed like the Eagles were really interested.
My reaction to that was, I can't believe the Giants overpaid for him. And he's a guy that, has been hurt. I think he's got 2 career interceptions, both in the first month of 2018. He played 3 games. He's coming off an injury, 3 games last year, never been to a Pro Bowl. I don't think of him as an elite cornerback, but I think the numbers I saw, 26 million, I think Schefter reported 26.5 million guaranteed, 13 or 13.5 million signing bonus, incentives that could bring the total value to 46 million. I mean, for Adoree, I just don't see it. So if I'm the Eagles, if he did come here and told the Giants to wait, it's not like they could have matched that deal or would have wanted to. I just can't imagine. They're already on the hook to Darius Slay for a lot of money. So I can't imagine they would have considered paying that, to the cornerback position in general, and just throwing their salary cap totally out of whack. I'm sure they could have found a way to do it to get him in under the cap, but whether they would have wanted to, he's not that good. And even before he got hurt last year, he was not playing well by all accounts. So the Giants have been overspending. They've been signing a lot of guys. It almost has a little dream team feel to it up there. I think they've been overpaying for some guys. They brought in some talent, but we'll see how that goes. But I certainly wouldn't have dreamed that he would have gotten that kind of money, and I certainly wouldn't have paid it.
Yeah, cornerbacks seem to get overpaid. Look, every position gets overpaid in a free agency, but corners and sometimes edge rushers just break the bank in free agency, and that's kind of what happened with Adoree. But the Eagles still, I mean, that when you're looking at their needs, you can argue the corner is at the very top of the list right now.
Yeah, you can. I mean, Avonte Maddox right now is their only experienced CB2. I mean, he's the default guy right now. I mean, obviously there's a lot of time to go, and there's the draft. They have not had good luck drafting cornerbacks lately, certainly. But we've talked about this a lot. Avonte Maddox to me is not a starting outside corner, and I think it'd be a mistake. I think it was a mistake last year to try it, and I think it'd be a bigger mistake this year to do it because you already know he can't do it. Now, one of these other guys, these Jameson Houstons and Michael Jacquetts, and maybe they'll look at these guys, but they got to find a cornerback, and guys are going off the board, and maybe there's a budget guy out there that that they like, that they think they can get for a reasonable price, but generally you're going to get what you pay for. So it's tough. I think it's a mistake to go into the season with Avonte Maddox as your CB2, but right now he's the best of the next bunch other than Slay.
Yeah, I agree with you. It'd be a mistake. I mean, there are still some options. Right as we started this podcast, Kevin King re-signed with the Packers. He was the guy that might have made sense. Taller corner, former second-round pick. But he's back in Green Bay. Reportedly a 1-year, $6 million deal. We'll see how much of that is real, but that's a pretty good deal for him. There are other options. Mackenzie Alexander has that Minnesota connection to Gannon. But I mean, he's kind of, I think, more of a nickel. There's Garyon Conley, who former first-round pick. It didn't work out for him in his previous spots, but maybe I like that. That might be a low-cost, high-reward type of signing. Brian Poole is a name, has that Denard Wilson connection from the Jets. He's, I think, 28 now, so not a young guy, but I think they need to sign someone. I don't think it's enough to go into a season with Avonte and drafting a guy in one of the top rounds. I think they need to sign someone or trade.
The Asante Samuel family has done well in this building. There's two guys at number 6 that, Surtain, two guys whose fathers were really good cornerbacks. They could be thinking that way. Howie's not big on, drafting for need. And I'd certainly, it's not the direction I would go, but they could be thinking about that. It'd be wild. If Asante Jr. is as good a quote as his dad, then I want him in the building. But they've got to figure that out, especially, there's good receivers in this division, and they're going to be seeing these guys every week. So they've got to figure something at CB2 out.
Yeah, and they have 11 draft picks, and they have a bunch in the first few rounds. I think at 37, there's going to be really good corners available. That's kind of, and we'll get into my Eagles only mock draft. I had them taking one at 37, but I think there are options there if they want to go that way. It's scary because, like you mentioned, they haven't done a very good job of drafting corners, but it's not a reason to not try. You have to keep trying.
You're right. And second round, they've gotten, that's where they drafted Eric Allen and Brian Dawkins. They've gotten some pretty good defensive backs in the second round.
It's been a while.
Sidney Jones.
Yeah, I mean, since then we're talking, Nate Allen.
Nate Allen was all right.
He was all right. Wasn't a second round pick.
Nate Allen is the only defensive back the Eagles have drafted since 2000. What year was he drafted? And since 2010 to start 16 games for the Eagles.
Wow.
In a season, not total, in a season. He's the only one. They've just and he did that once in 2013. Nate Allen was he's like their best secondary guy they've drafted recently.
Yeah. I mean, you go through the list of those early round defensive backs recently. I mean, it really started with Jaquan.
Yeah.
But it's brutal. Eric Rowe and we know Sydney. It's been tough, but you got to keep shooting. That's the only way you make a shot eventually.
Oh, that's good. It's a good metaphor, but you're right. You're right. I mean, I think they're going to have to take a corner. If they don't sign somebody they can plug and play, they're going to have to draft somebody and hope he can start. As you just can't go into the season with what you have. You can't.
No, I agree with you. You can't, but at least they got a safety, and that's a pretty big deal. Joining us now on the Eagle Eye podcast from the Star Tribune, Andrew Krammer. Andrew, thanks so much for joining us. We want to talk to you a little bit about Anthony Harris. You had a chance to cover him in Minneapolis. So let's just start with the basics. What are the Eagles getting in him right now?
Yeah, right now they're getting, I think, a very, very smart player. That's the number one trait with Anthony. And he would have been drafted too, had he not, at Virginia's last year, had a shoulder injury, labrum surgery. Physically, he's not the most athletic guy. He's going to win with his mind and his preparation and just being in the right spot. He's a very instinctual player. He's not too far off from the guy who led the NFL in interceptions just 2 years ago. Last year was really rough, and I'm sure we'll talk about that. But I think that kind of left a little bit of a bad taste in the rest of the league's mouth about this guy and thinking that, well, was that 1 year a fluke? And the Vikings didn't think so. The Vikings were trying to push to re-sign him before Philadelphia signed him. And I think Anthony wanted this kind of short-term deal to prove to people that I can come in and rebound and do what I did in 2019 and potentially, lead the NFL in some of these categories that he did. I think, again, I go back to the intelligence. What you're going to get is one of the smartest players in the Eagles locker room, and not just defensive backs, not just defenders, but the entire locker room. This guy learned from Harrison Smith. This guy learned from Mike Zimmer. He's had two of the better just player-coach combinations that he's been around to kind of absorb the entire 5 years he's been in the league. And he started up on special teams, kind of the way that a lot of grinders do, guys that really kind of work their way up the ladder. And I think that's going to stay with him. And it certainly did in Minnesota, that preparation and all the work that he puts into it. This really matters to him. And I know that's the case for a lot of NFL guys, but for guys that get paid in free agency, I know that's a big concern of, well, is this just going to be it? No, he's out there to prove it. And I think he's going to do it again this year.
Well, one thing we've always noticed is with undrafted guys, they always have that, that hunger, that high draft picks, or really sometimes any draft picks don't have, just a little extra chip on their shoulder. They're always trying to prove themselves. Is he a guy who kind of falls into that category?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think he likes the fact that he was one of the unsung guys in this defense for the Vikings. You guys know, the NFC Championship game not too long ago, the Vikings were the number one defense that year in 2017. And Anthony was really just stepping into a starting role. He didn't start that much that year. And he kind of came into it and kind of felt like the new guy on the defense a little bit and had to prove himself. And no, I can contribute too, and we can be successful with me instead of with somebody else who was starting for them at the time. And I think that kind of carries with him no matter what. And people, are not too far off to remind him of, you weren't a first round pick. You weren't this or that. And I'm sure people are going to remind him in Philadelphia, you didn't get paid the way you would have if you hadn't played on the franchise tag. He's going to carry those things, and he's really good about that. And frankly, I go back to Mike Zimmer because he's had such an influence on all of his defensive backs, and Anthony's his own person, but Mike brings that out of people too and really fosters that. And I think Anthony kind of has developed that on his own quite a bit too.
Okay, so let's talk about last year, because 2019 he has this incredible season. We know about the interceptions. And then last year we see the stats dip, and I guess there are multiple factors for that. But when you look at it, what were the factors that contributed to the downturn in stats?
It was everybody around him leaving, except for Harrison Smith. It was the entire turnover of the cornerback room. This guy went from playing with an all-pro in Xavier Rhodes, who's up and down, but certainly is capable of playing at a really high level. Went from playing next to Trey Waynes, who before he got hurt last year was one of the better corners in the league and got paid like it. And then playing with Mackenzie Alexander, another guy, very good slot corner. Those three in front of him in 2018, 2019, that really allowed him to kind of be a ball hawk. It allowed him to kind of range around the field, sideline to sideline, play that free safety role. The Vikings really like to put Harrison Smith in the box. They like to let him work down low, and then like to have Anthony back because he's really good with his vision. He can see things, anticipates things. It goes back to his preparation and his play study. Last year, though, he had rookie corners. They had to play a lot more too deep. He was just responsible for, hey, stay over top of this young corner and make sure that we don't get beat on the double move, get beat deep by something else. He had to worry about a lot. And you could tell that when you go back and watch some of the plays where he got beat for touchdowns, it's because he's watching some kind of underneath route, worried that the young corner is not going to necessarily pick up on the right read, because they play a lot of switching defense with the Vikings where it's just pattern matching and reading. And it's really hard for rookies. And Anthony kind of had to be that coach on the field and kind of pick that up for a lot of those guys. And he didn't have an interception. And I think that was a big part of why, was just the teammates around him and the way the Vikings play defense. They weren't going to bend to Anthony and say, all right, you just go do what you do. We'll worry. We'll let the corners figure themselves out. He had to do it and kind of help them collectively.
His first 2 years in Minnesota was with Gannon, who's here now. Do you think that's a factor with him? I don't know if you've had a chance to talk to him yet, but did they have a particularly good relationship as far as you know? And do you think that could have been one of the reasons he wanted to come here?
I could see that, absolutely. Jonathan Gannon was one of the most well-liked coaches in Minnesota. I mean, I remember we had PR people coming up to us early on, just people who wanted to point out that, hey, this guy's an up-and-comer. You need to pay attention to this coach. And you start talking to coaches about him, and you figure out that this guy's got the same mentality that a guy like Anthony does, this kind of prove-it, grinder, chip on your shoulder, just kind of every day realizing that I'm not going to be given any respect. I need to go out and earn it. And I don't know the particulars with Anthony and Jonathan's relationship, but all I know is that both of these guys were really well-liked in Minnesota. And when I think Jonathan left in 2017 or something like that, Anthony was really just getting started. He was a special teamer. And so, and Jonathan was an assistant DBs coach. So I think they bonded over that kind of lesser roles and stuff and just putting our head down, working, getting no recognition. People in Minnesota are thrilled to see Jonathan Gannon kind of climb the ranks because they know he deserves it. And yeah, I could see Anthony very much wanting to rejoin him.
With the Harris signing, it kind of signals to some people that, yeah, maybe Gannon is probably going to implement a lot of what Zimmer's done in his career. So for some Eagles fans who aren't really familiar with that defense, what should they know about it? I mean, if he's really going to implement a lot of the Zimmer characteristics.
Yeah, it's a lot of aggressive cornerback play. It's a lot of press man coverage. They will adjust to their personnel, certainly, but over time, if it is truly going to be that, they're going to look for long cornerbacks who can get in receivers' faces, deal with big receivers, and then allow their safeties to kind of do their thing and kind of be a little less predictable. Zimmer likes in that kind of system, they like the safeties to be interchangeable as much as possible. While I said Harrison liked to play up in the box and Anthony deep, they would move these guys back and forth a lot. They want the guys to know both positions. Intelligence is going to be so important playing under Jonathan Gannon because they're going to ask these guys, I would assume, to learn every single role. It's not just you're an outside corner, go do that. It's no, you need to know what the nickel does because in case somebody gets hurt, you might need to move inside there. They're going to cross-train these guys quite a bit. And that comes with then giving the freedom for somebody like Anthony. I know he enjoyed it so much to be able to just fly around the field and just read quarterbacks. That's when he was at his best in 2019. And if Jonathan picked anything up from Mike Zimmer and kind of how he wants to run his defense, it's going to be giving those safeties a lot of freedom to work with. And he knows Anthony. He knows how smart he is. And I think you're going to see him kind of put him in those kind of free safety coverage spots and just trust him to read quarterbacks. And like I said, underneath, it's going to be a lot of aggressive coverage from the corners.
How did he not go to the Pro Bowl 2 years ago?
That's a great question. He's not a household name. He's just not. I mean, you guys know that. You guys know him now, but I'm sure a couple of years ago you see this name pop up, and he wasn't, because he was undrafted, all those things. He's also not a campaigner. He's not one of those guys that has the dances, or even Harrison Smith. He's not one of those guys either. But Harrison's got the logo. He's got the hitman thing. He's just got more of that swagger to his game. Anthony just goes to work. He doesn't do anything else. You know, we were talking about Clint Kubiak before the podcast, another guy in terms of a coach who just doesn't have any kind of bluster to him. You talk to him, he's super understated. Anthony's the same exact way. You wouldn't think, if you met this guy in the street, that he was a professional player of any kind, because he just has the demeanor of a regular everyday guy. But then you turn it on, the lights turn on, and this guy knows what he's doing, and he's in the right spot more often than not. And so you guys know the Pro Bowl. It's a little bit of a popularity contest, certainly, and he's just wasn't that popular at the time.
That kind of leads us. I want to kind of ask about his personality. We haven't had a chance to talk with him yet. I think we will soon. What's he like as a guy? I mean, is he all football all the time, or does he have a personality?
No, he does. He does. He's one of those guys that's super business oriented. He's got like a cryogenic business back in Virginia that he's invested a bunch of money in. He's very kind of well-versed in terms of life. Like, he's very interested in kind of having those business ventures set up properly, financially, all that stuff. He's just a laid back guy, though. I think you see there's not a whole lot of, you don't hear from teammates or anything that there's a whole lot of extracurriculars. He just focuses in the season on the job. And he gets that from Harrison Smith. He gets that from Terrence Newman, whom he played with for many years here. He gets that from the coaching staff and just kind of everybody that was around him and molded the way he views football. And so off the field, though, I think he's going to be one of the more well-liked guys in the locker room. And he was here. And I think it's just the way he approaches it. He's going to attend all the special teams meetings, even though he doesn't have to, potentially. He's going to do all the little things that you just wouldn't think a guy who's $5 million a year would have to do. And the media is going to love him. I think reporters are going to love him, because win or lose, Anthony was a go-to guy, because he would stand up and answer questions no matter what happened. He could have got beat for 2 touchdowns that day. He's going to stand up and tell you why. He's going to break it down. Sometimes to the coach's chagrin, he might go a little too far into it, but he's just open and honest and a really upstanding guy. And so personality-wise, he's not going to be the, funny, cracking jokes, that kind of guy, but you're just going to get a laid-back guy who does his job really well.
We have Darius Slay for all the jokes, so the secondary is well represented there.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Speaking of guys who are good with the media, I got to ask you about Sendejo. Did you ever get a good quote out of Sendejo?
God, no.
Worst ever, right?
Absolutely not. We were when we were talking about Anthony in 2017, I was thinking Sendejo was the starter that year for the Vikings, and yeah, it was night and day when they made that switch with Sendejo to Harris, because Harrison Smith is a little laid back too, and he likes to be out in the shadows and not do a lot of the media. Anthony was a godsend, because you're right, Sendejo was just a barren wasteland, and when it was him and Harrison, you couldn't get anything out of the safety combination.
Andrew, I made the mistake on a few years ago when the Eagles signed Sendejo on our introductory press conference. It was over the phone. I made the mistake of asking him about the NFC Championship game when he kind of got run over. As you'd imagine, it didn't go over very well.
Yeah, there are a few stories like that. I remember actually this, because I know undrafted, he came out of Rice. And it should have been this great football story, right? He shows up in Minnesota, does the same thing Anthony Harris did, where he works his way up in special teams, kind of grinds, and then he gets paid. And I think it was 2016 or 15. They awarded him this big special teamer contract. And we all walk up to him and are just like, thinking this is going to be the time that he's going to have something to say, talk about his life, getting to this point, setting up his family, all the things that guys just dream about. And he just goes, I'm not going to talk about the contract. We'll just talk about football, and just shuts it down. And we were just all looking at each other like, this is the first time we've ever wanted to talk to you, but okay.
That sounds about right from what we know of him.
Hey, I got to ask you one last thing.
Yep.
Dave and I were out there, obviously, in 17 or in February of 18 for the Super Bowl for a week, 8 days. I think the high, Dave, what was the high? 6? That was the high.
Something
How
like that.
can you live like that?
Hey, they play football indoors. We try to do most of our things indoors for 6 months out of the year. It helps to love skiing and some of the outdoor stuff. But yes, it's brutal. It's just brutal.
Reuben and I always talk about that week. Like every Super Bowl is in Miami, every Florida, Texas, and then the one year the Eagles go, we're -6. I have a cold. It was brutal.
That's the one I got to go to too, because they don't send me. I'm the third Vikings writer, basically. So we've got guys that go to the Super Bowl. I'm not one of them. And I'm like, oh, I'll go to this one and stand outside the stadium for an hour waiting to get in. Yeah.
Well, we feel your pain, and we do thank you for your time. That's Andrew Krammer from the Star Tribune, co-host of the Access Vikings podcast. You can follow him on Twitter at Andrew_Krammer, 2 M's in Krammer. Andrew, thanks so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me on, guys. It was a good time.
Hey, Eagles fans, it's time to look forward to a dream vacation. The Philadelphia Eagles fan cruise tickets are selling out quickly. The ship sails in March of 2022 for 7 days and 7 nights with Eagles fans and only Eagles fans. Book your tickets now at PhiladelphiaEaglesCruise.com.
Thank you to Andrew Krammer. That was great stuff from him. Rube, let's shift gears a little bit. DeSean Jackson going home. Pretty cool. I think it's a good opportunity for him to finish his career in LA, going to the Rams. You're still bullish on the idea that he can play. The question is, can he stay healthy? I mean, he's proven he can still play when he's on the field. It's just he can't stay on the field.
Yeah, and I mean, that goes without saying. I just, you look at the injuries. I mean, you got cheap shotted by 2 guys on one play.
We didn't talk about that enough, by the way. I know everyone was so miserable about the way the season was going, but that really was a cheap shot. And I felt awful for DeSean because he worked his way back from that injury, comes back, and then he just gets cheap shotted on a punt where he said, "Hey, put me back there. I want to make a play happen." That was a shame.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. And I'll always be a fan of DeSean's game. I mean, some of the plays he made in his career, and we saw, I mean, his last catch as an Eagle was 81 yards from Jalen Hurts. The only catch he ever had from Jalen Hurts. This guy played with, everybody from Donovan to Jalen Hurts. It's kind of wild, with all the Kevin Cobbs and Vince Youngs and people in between, Michael Vick, obviously. Carson, but Nick Foles. But
I was wondering if you're going to mention Carson because I thought maybe we'd get through a pod without saying his name, but we didn't do it.
Yeah, I was thinking about that.
We got to restart the clock. It's been 0 days since.
But I still think that he can play, and I think injuries are a funny thing, and just because you get hurt a couple times, and they've been serious injuries. I mean, let's face it, DeSean had like 3 games in his second stint with the Eagles that he played start to finish. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen again. And I think they probably – I think his role here was probably – and it was by necessity. They didn't have anyone else. So when he was healthy, they went out and he played, 40 or 50 snaps, and he played too much and he got hurt. I think when he goes out to the Rams, you would think at this point in his career they would, play him 15 to 20 snaps a game and use that speed. I think the receivers are so bad here that they had no choice. He was their best one, but that won't be the case there. And I think that was part of the problem here, was that you have a guy at that age with his injury history. You just can't expect him to go out and play 50 snaps or 45 snaps, which they did. And so I think if he's used the right way, he could still be a threat. I don't expect him to have a 1,000-yard season, but I wouldn't be surprised if he catches, 30 passes for 500 yards and a few touchdowns. And he can help a team. There's no doubt in my mind he can still help a team. He can still run. We saw it. We saw it the last 2 full games he played. One, he had 2 50-yard touchdowns, and one he had an 81-yard touchdown. So there's no question in my mind if he can get to a team. Also, there are teams where guys don't get hurt as much as here. So maybe just going to a team where the strength and conditioning staff can work with him on staying healthy, and the trainers, whatever it is, whatever the issue is here, he won't have that there. I wouldn't count out maybe not a great season from him, but he can help that team win.
It'll be fun to watch him with Stafford too.
And Stafford's a guy who can chuck the ball down the field. We know that.
Yeah. I think Stafford's criminally underrated, by the way, like in just the grand scheme of things. I love watching that guy play.
Yeah. Oh, he can spin it. And I don't think he's ever been surrounded by great talent. He's had really good receivers at times, but he's never been on great teams. Not sure he's ever had a great coach. It's been kind of it hasn't been a great situation up there. He certainly puts up numbers. I mean, it'll be interesting to see how both those guys do in their, Goff and Stafford with their new teams. It's going to be a really interesting year, quarterback wise in general, with so many guys changing teams, and there's going to be more of that. Some of these young guys coming in, how they do. It'll be very, very interesting. I put Jalen Hurts right in the middle of that, but yeah, I like Stafford. I like anybody who just puts up, I'm a stats guy. I don't care about winning and losing.
Oh, he puts up numbers, man.
I just want a guy to throw for 500 yards. I don't care if he wins or loses.
Stafford also has he was the no-look pass guy before Mahomes was the no-look pass guy. People don't give him credit for it.
Yeah, he pioneered that, but Mahomes mastered it.
He did. That's fair. We want to piggyback off of the DeSean stuff because he's obviously an undersized receiver. DeVonta Smith. At the pro day in Alabama, it was funny. He did this virtual Zoom call with reporters, national across the country, and he was asked a few different times about his weight, and he seemed real hesitant to admit that he's still at 170 pounds. How much does this bother you? And because it's look, there have been light receivers before. DeSean was, I think, 175 coming out of college. Hollywood Brown was 166 a few years ago. So if Smith's at 170, it's not unheard of, but we're also talking about a guy who might be a top 10 pick.
It's a concern. It is a concern to me because, you're going to be seeing a lot of press coverage. And, to me, almost the strength is kind of just as important as the actual weight number. I don't think DeSean is ever 175 in his life, by the way. I think I'd be surprised if he was, but it's a concern. And, when you talk about guys getting hurt, when you talk about their durability, I don't know if he has the frame to put on another, 10, 15 pounds and still have that speed. We've seen a lot of guys who can fly, who can run fast, and certainly the production was there as well. But it's certainly a concern. He's a guy you would have loved to have him at the combine. That won't happen. But yeah, I would say I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't go as high as maybe some of the mocks have him going.
Yeah, I don't know. It's tough because on the one hand, I get why it's a concern. On the other, he did just dominate the SEC. I mean, I don't think that happens by mistake. And I don't even want him to put on weight, though. I see some people he can bulk up. I don't think it makes sense to just bulk up for the sake of bulking up. That's his game. That's how big he plays. And I think that's what he is. And I think the teams that are interested in him just have to ask themselves if him at his current state is someone they want on their team. I wouldn't try to add weight. I'd be scared to do that.
Well, I think anybody, if they can keep their speed, can be a little more durable. You put on a few pounds, but I think it does help that he played in a conference as close to the NFL when it comes to stylistically and it comes to cornerbacks. I mean, the SEC produces 15 NFL corners every year. So he's played against, pro caliber corners. He's seen a lot of, press coverage. So if the film is there, which it is, I'd probably be reluctant to take him at 6. But I would take him soon after.
What if Chase is off the board, Pitts is off the board?
I'm sorry?
Chase is off the board, Pitts is off the board. You're at 6. Smith is there. Do you think about it?
I would think about it. I mean, I haven't seen enough film to have that comfort level to take him there. I mean, I would certainly think about it if that's what Mr. Lurie told me to do. But I'd be a little concerned to take him there. Yeah.
Interesting.
But I don't think those two guys will be off the board at 6. I think there's going to be a run on quarterbacks early, and that's what my mock is going to reflect, that I've already started working on and struggling with already.
Yeah, I know. I mean, and that's normally the way it goes is, if you want a quarterback, you go up and take them. You don't wait. And we've seen that so many times in the last decade that, wherever you think the quarterbacks are going to go, they're going earlier, whether they deserve to or not. And I think there's a good chance that happens here because we all know Trevor Lawrence is going 1. I think Zach Wilson's going 2. If I'm Miami and I'm not taking a quarterback, guess what? I'm out. I'm fine. Someone's moving up to get him. And look, I even think Atlanta at 4 is a possible quarterback spot.
Yeah, and
the only team we know is not taking a quarterback is Cincinnati.
Right. I don't know why Atlanta wouldn't. I mean, I guess Matt Ryan's going to make a ton of money the next 2 years. And, if he's healthy, he's going to be the quarterback there for a couple more years. But if you find a generational talent, if you think Trey Lance is the heir apparent to Matt Ryan, why wouldn't you take him?
A guy like Trey Lance might need a year or two.
Exactly. I'm giving away my mock draft now, but
sorry.
Matt Ryan, holy crap, the guy's thrown for 4,000 yards and completed, I think it's 62% of his passes 10 straight years. Never wins anything, but man, I told you, I don't care about winning and losing. I just like stats.
Matt Ryan, he flies under the radar so much. He's never talked about. There's never.
Yeah, and he never misses a game. Yeah. There's going to be such a turnover at that position over the next couple of years. I mean, Breeze, Brady's not going to play that much longer.
Are you sure?
I mean, he might play another 7 years. But Aaron Rodgers, all these guys are like the face of the quarterback position. I mean, Matt Ryan, these guys have been in the league like 20 years. I mean, Breeze, so that these guys came in with Donovan, who hasn't played in a decade.
We just saw Phillip Rivers retire. Obviously, he was part of that group. Eli's gone now.
Yeah, there's going to be.
Ben's probably got one more year.
Who's that?
Big Ben's probably got one more year.
Ben's probably got one more year. Yeah, and so I think all that really plays into. I mean, teams need quarterbacks. I mean, we just named like 8 guys who are Hall of Famers, who are all in the top like 15 in yards and touchdowns. This has been a real golden era of quarterback play.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
There's a couple young guys who are promising, but who are who's the next generation other than Mahomes? There's guys who've had a good season, but we'll see what that next generation looks like. And some of these guys, that's why if I'm the Falcons, I'm not thinking, well, I have Matt Ryan for the next year or two. I'm thinking, who's my guy for the next 15 years?
Yeah. And you're right. And if they think whoever is that guy, then, and that's always my thing with quarterbacks. If you find your guy, you take your guy and you don't worry about everything else. That's always been my philosophy on that. All right, let's go through my Eagles only mock draft. 11 picks, so we'll go through it quickly. I don't know if they're going to take 11 players. That's a lot.
They won't.
Yeah, they're probably right. They took 10 last year.
Right.
They started with 10 picks and they traded. They moved around a little bit, but ended up with 10 players. So it's possible. Probably unlikely, but I'll start in the first round. I took Kyle Pitts out of Florida, and in my mind, I was thinking that Jamar Chase was off the board because to me, I'd still go Jamar Chase over Kyle Pitts.
Really?
Yeah. I would. But with that said, it is easier to find better receivers later than it is to find better tight ends later.
No doubt.
Yeah.
And I think it's a mistake to look at Kyle Pitts as a tight end. I think he's more than that. He's a real hybrid.
He is. I mean, but he's a tight end. Like he's you can play him at receiver, but they probably wouldn't most of the time. Yeah, and another thing I keep hearing is, I just wanted to bring up this point that some people are worried about them still having Dallas Goedert and if taking Kyle Pitts forces you into 12 personnel too much, but Goddard's also in a contract year. So there's no guarantee he's here for the long term. I mean,
Sure.
maybe they try to re-sign him, but having Dallas Goedert on the roster is not a reason to pass up Kyle Pitts.
Absolutely.
My second round pick, 37, I went Eric Stokes from Georgia. Good size, pretty fast. I mean, he just ran a 4.25 at the Georgia Pro Day, and all these times this year are tough because there's no combine. The combine is great because you get all the testing is so standard, whereas the numbers we're going to get over the next month, you got to kind of take with a grain of salt. But if you're running the 4.25, even on official, that's fast. Even if it's a 4.3, 4.3, whatever, that's a fast corner. I think the Eagles could use some more speed, and they need another starting corner. So I like him there. Even if it's not him, I like the idea of a corner in the second round.
Same.
Yeah. Third round pick, I went Amari Rodgers from Clemson. This is a fun pick, and he's not really an outside receiver. So I know there's this stigma around taking a slot guy that early, but they need to get more explosive from the slot. And that's not a knock on Greg Ward, but I think he's a limited player as your slot. And a guy like Rodgers changes that. And if you can get this scenario was intriguing to me because the middle of your field just got so much better if you can get Pitts and Rodgers in the first and third round.
Yeah, and I think the way the slot has evolved now, I think you can't really look at it like it's the third receiver. It's really not, or it doesn't have to be. I mean, for this team, it kind of has been, but you're allowed to have explosion. You're allowed to have vertical threat. You're allowed to have a playmaker in the slot. We've seen it before. It helps if you have good outside guys, but I would have no problem with that.
Yeah, and Nelly. I mean, when Nelly was good, having that explosion from the slot made a huge difference. With the 84th pick, so they have 2 third-round picks because they had the one from the Colts. I went Jordan Smith from UAB. Interesting story with him. You might remember that whole Florida credit card scheme he was allegedly involved in. So he bounced back to a community college, and then he went to UAB where he's been really productive. He's played an outside backer, but I think he's more of a 4-3 end. So there might be a little bit of some growing pains, but the Eagles need edge rushers still. I know they have Barnett, and I know they have Graham for another year or 2 years now, but it's a position where they can use more production.
Can always use a young edge rusher. And yeah, we'll see. I mean, and you didn't mention Sweat, who is, I consider a good prospect. We'll see where he goes if he takes that next step. Thought he took
Contract year.
He is in a contract year. I don't think he'll. Well, we'll see. We'll see what kind of year he has. I mean, I think he's a guy that if he has a good enough year, they probably want to keep him. They should be able to. We'll see.
Yeah, but sometimes people will pay for potential with edge rushers more than some other positions. So he could get a big payday.
It's true. If he gets 8 sacks this year, he could price himself out of. Yeah.
With the 5th round pick, I have Andre Cisco from Syracuse. Really started off his career strong. The last couple of years haven't gone very well. But I think safety is still a position they'll draft because, they signed Harris, but that's a 1-year deal. Rodney, 1 year left coming off the injury. After that, we know how light they are. So, and especially we just heard Andrew Krammer talking to us about the importance of safety in if Gannon runs a similar scheme to Zimmer, how important it is. It makes sense to reload on safety.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. 5th round, Tony Fields, linebacker from West Virginia. I know it's late for a linebacker. I still don't think – I know they drafted one in the 3rd round last year. I guess they could do it again. But Fields is an interesting one because he's athletic, and that's the way the league's going. So I have him in the 5th round. I'll run through the other ones real quick here.
You just went Syracuse, West Virginia, and they just played each other yesterday in the NCAA tournament. That's interesting.
That is interesting. Didn't think about it that way. Let me just run through the last few picks here.
Yeah.
6th rounders, Jamar Jefferson, running back, Morgan State. 6th rounder Mustafa Johnson from Colorado, 6th rounder KJ Costello, the quarterback from Mississippi State. He might go undrafted. That might be a reach there. That's the one I might have reached on. 7th rounder Manny Rugamba, Miami of Ohio, former Iowa kid. And 7th round Jimmy Morrissey, center from Pittsburgh, local kid. That might be the one position, interior offensive line that I should have maybe drafted earlier. I think, you have Samalu, but eventually you're going to need to replace Kelsey. We don't know how long Brooks has left. They could probably use some more depth there.
Morrissey's the kid from LaSalle, I think.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Huntington Valley. It is interesting. I wouldn't be shocked if they do get a guard center somewhere in the, 5th round. You know what? They're going to end up with a 4th round pick, and they're going to take a guard center there. That's my prediction.
Yeah, they could. Because right now that's the only round they don't have a pick in, which is just the way it worked out. But yeah, I could see that. Yeah, Jannard Avery. 11 picks is a lot.
Yeah, I think they haven't had 11 picks since 2011, I believe, or 2010. And on top of 10 picks last year, I think 9 of whom are still here.
No, 8, because Tega's gone and Casey Tuhill is in Washington.
Right. Tega's with the Chiefs and Tuhill's with Washington.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They lost Tuhill because they had to keep Alshon on the roster.
Yeah. So, but still, 8 out of 10. I don't know how many of them will be players, but they got to hit on some of those guys, and they got to hit on a bunch of these 11, right, if they end up with 11.
Yeah. Having all those picks early, it's like a treasure trove. Like, they have to hit them.
For the first 85, I believe, 85 picks. That's something they haven't had, I think, since 2005.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we'll talk more about that as we get closer to the draft. But, yeah, it's been a long time since they had one of those drafts where they just hit. And, to make this rebuild work, they're going to have to hit these guys.
Yeah. You got anything else before we wrap this up?
No, I don't think so. It's a beautiful day out. I hope your hay fever lets you get outside a little bit. Yeah,
I just struggle through it because I like being outside too much.
Sixers late game tonight. Sixers playing great. Fun to watch.
Yeah, those late games are tough for me.
Because you get up at 5:30 every morning.
I do wake up early. Yeah. Can't help it. All right. If you enjoy the Eagle Eye podcast, please do us a favor, rate and subscribe.
Like 5:30 to 6:30.
I'm a slow waker upper. I'll wake up. Sometimes I'll read. Sometimes I will get a little quick workout in. Then I eat breakfast. I do work. Like, sometimes I like getting work done before people are around to bother me. Like you. I wanted to see if you picked up on that hint. But yeah, I just like waking up early. I don't know.
All right.
If you like the podcast, rate, subscribe.
I don't sleep in, but I don't get up at 5:30. I like to get up by, usually 6:45 or 7, somewhere in there.
Okay. That's good. That's early. That's still early.
All right.
Yeah. I'm trying to get through this. Rate, subscribe, wherever you get your pods. We want to thank Andrew Krammer for joining us. Great stuff from him. So do us a favor. Follow him on Twitter. Andrew_Krammer, 2 M's. I'm going to stop this now before Reuben interrupts me again. For Reuben, I'm Dave. We'll talk to you soon.